This was a really simple and cheap project. I found a stack of heat-treated pallets at a local industrial park that a company was just going to throw away, so I grabbed some of them. This project only used wood from one pallet though. To take apart the pallet, I used a tool called a wrecking claw, which is sold at some Home Depots. I used it on the initial pass of the pallets, then I used a regular hammer to make the nail heads damper out just enough to get the wrecking claw under them and pull them out. The leverage that the wrecking claw provides made taking out all these nails almost effortless. Next, I planed the 2 pieces of wood that were going to be the tabletop. After that, I cut 4 2x4s down to become the legs of the table and used a long ruler to draw out a taper for all of them. Then I cut the tapers out on the table saw. Next, I planned out a curve for the skirt by tracing a line made by flexing a ruler. I cut that shape out with a jigsaw, then split that shape down the middle so that I had 2 identical front and back skirt pieces. I used a router to put a 1/4 inch round over on the skirt, then I used 2 narrow pieces of wood for the sides, which I sanded down even with the front and back curve. With everything clamped together, I drilled out some holes for some wooden dowels. Most of the dowels went in okay, but one of them split the skirt pretty bad, so I had to fill that in later with glue and sawdust. At this point, I clamped the legs to the skirt and put the tabletop on to get a look at the general shape. I decided I wanted to give the legs a curved shape. Then I decided I hated the top, so I exchanged the top for some thinner pallet slats, and the thinner ones looked way better. I ripped them down, glued them up, and gave the tabletop the same round over as the skirt. Then I moved back to the table legs. I tried cutting out the new curve with the jigsaw, but it just kept dying, so I went out and got a Ryobi Band Saw, and that made it way easier to cut. I clamped the legs together while I sanded them so they all had the same curve. Then I rounded over the inside part of the legs to match the top and the skirt. I sanded off the pallet stamps and rounded over the bottoms of the legs to give it a little visual lift from the floor. Next, it was time to glue it all together and add the stretchers to keep the legs straight. I added a similar curve to the bottom stretcher to match the curve of the skirt, which I had to do with the jigsaw because I had already glued it to the legs. After giving the whole thing a sanding with fine grit sandpaper, it was time to stain, and I used Minwax 1-step poly stain for this. My garage was below freezing the entire project, and I was afraid that if I used a water-based finish, it would freeze and ruin the finish while it dried. Between each coat, I had to carry the whole thing in the house to dry. I was really pleased with how the color turned out. It was a color that was right in between the finish of the dining room table and the floor, so it fit the rest of the room nicely. This project was so simple and cheap, and the best part is it was made with all free wood. There's no screws, it's just wood and glue. There's a couple people I'd like to thank. One is Izzy Swan. He's like the god of taking apart pallets for reclaiming. I'll put a link to his channel down in the description. Another group of guys I'd like to thank are the guys at Reclaimed Audio. It's an incredible podcast. If it wasn't for guys like that, I wouldn't be motivated to make stuff like this. So thank you guys very much. Link to all the tools I use are in the description. If you like this project, subscribe and share and give a thumbs up. I'm John, Lousy Craftsman, and I'll see you later.